I never expected anyone to notice me on a frozen bench, Eleanor muttered under her breath as she tightened her scarf and pulled her wool coat closer around her shoulders. The wind cut sharply across the park, whipping snow into tiny clouds that danced at her feet. She had been walking this path for years, always alone, the crunch of snow under her boots the only sound that accompanied her thoughts. Her eyes caught a figure hunched over on a nearby bench, shivering visibly despite a threadbare coat and gloves with fingers fraying at the seams. Eleanor hesitated, heart tugged by the sight, and then, with a decisive motion, she slipped off her own warm boots, feeling the chill already creeping into her toes, and set them gently beside the stranger. Here, she said, voice low but firm, these might help you. The figure looked up, surprise and gratitude mingling in his expression, and Eleanor offered a small, encouraging smile before stepping back, careful not to linger too long. Her breath fogged in the icy air, forming wisps that drifted toward the bare branches above, and she noticed how quiet the park had become, the usual distant chatter of children replaced by the steady whisper of winter wind. She imagined the stranger slipping on the boots, the warmth beginning to spread slowly, and for a brief moment, Eleanor felt a connection, a small ripple of satisfaction that she had been able to ease Someone's discomfort. She turned to leave, each step deliberate on the slick path, when she sensed a presence, a figure observing from across the park. A tall man, impeccably dressed despite the snow, his gaze steady and evaluating. Eleanor barely glanced at him, attributing his stance to coincidence, yet a faint instinct told her that he had noticed everything, that her act had not gone unseen. She continued walking, pulling her coat tighter, but could not shake the impression that she had been witnessed, that her small gesture had created a silent thread linking her to this stranger. The park stretched endlessly before her, the benches lined in neat rows, the ice glinting beneath the gray sky, and Eleanor's mind wandered to thoughts of kindness, how fleeting and fragile it could be, and yet how a single moment might hold more weight than a lifetime of intentions left unspoken. She reached the edge of the path and paused, glancing back briefly, imagining the boots now warming the stranger's feet, the stark contrast between the bitter cold and the tiny spark of comfort she had provided. The tall man still watched, his presence both imposing and intriguing, and Eleanor sensed that this encounter, so simple and unplanned, was quietly shifting the pattern of her day, introducing an element of anticipation she hadn't expected. She exhaled slowly, letting the cold nip at her cheeks, and for the first time that morning, allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest acts held the deepest significance, and that on a frozen bench, under the gray winter sky, a simple pair of boots could carry warmth far beyond the measure of the moment. The morning sun had barely risen when Eleanor returned to her small apartment, the cold from the park still lingering in her fingers and toes despite the warmth of the building. She removed her coat and gloves carefully, placing them on the rack by the door, and let out a breath she had been holding for the last hour. The kettle whistled softly on the stove, and she poured herself a cup of tea, the steam curling gently upward, filling the kitchen with warmth. Eleanor carried the cup to the window and peered outside, watching the snow glisten in the early light, each flake reflecting the soft pink and orange hues of sunrise. Her mind replayed the moment on the bench, the sudden impulse to give, and the quiet satisfaction that had followed. She sipped the tea slowly, savoring the warmth, but also reflecting on the subtle thrill that came from noticing the tall man observing her act. It was unusual, almost exhilarating, to feel that her small action had captured attention without her planning it. She placed the cup down and walked to the bookshelf, letting her fingers trail along the spines of old novels and memoirs, thinking about the many stories they contained, each one a reflection of human behavior, kindness, and unpredictability. Eleanor sat down at the small table by the window, opening a notebook she had kept for decades, and began writing about the morning, her hand moving deliberately, recording the details of the chill, the stranger, and the man watching. Each word felt like a layer of connection, a way to process the sensation of being seen without expecting anything in return. Outside, the neighborhood remained quiet, a few joggers passing by with heads down against the wind, dogs pulling on their leashes, their owners talking softly to calm them. Eleanor glanced at the clock, noting how quickly the hours were passing, yet feeling that time had slowed in that moment of reflection. She thought about the man across the park and how a single action, so simple, could ripple outward in ways she could not yet comprehend. The idea of influence without intention intrigued her, and she wondered whether this encounter might carry consequences beyond what she imagined. She returned to her tea, letting the flavor linger on her tongue, and thought about her own life, the many years spent quietly, observing, acting without expectation, and the small joys that came from unnoticed kindnesses. Eleanor had lived long enough to understand that gestures, no matter how minor they seemed, could leave impressions far larger than the giver could measure. The warmth from the tea and the quiet of her apartment provided a sense of security, a contrast to the cold outdoors, and yet, part of her ached with curiosity about the man who had noticed her. She imagined him telling someone about the scene, his impression of her composed demeanor and gentle action. The thought made her smile faintly, realizing that she had participated in a moment of human interaction that was authentic, unforced, and powerful in its simplicity. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, and Eleanor continued to reflect on the layers of experience, the intertwining of selfless acts and observed consequences. Her mind wandered to the possibilities ahead, the unforeseen outcomes that might follow, and the small sense of excitement that had begun to grow in her chest. She cleaned up her kitchen slowly, each movement mindful, her thoughts still tracing back to the morning encounter, considering the nuances of human behavior and the silent language of compassion that had unfolded without words. Sitting back down, Eleanor wrapped her hands around the cup, feeling the heat seep through her palms, and allowed herself to feel the quiet pride in having acted with generosity. She wondered if the stranger would remember her act, if it would influence his day or life, and if the tall man had any role in the unfolding change she had unknowingly set in motion. Eleanor felt a calm determination settle over her, a recognition that the world often held surprises for those who acted without anticipation of reward, and she considered the subtle power of observation, the potential for human connection, and the quiet strength found in simple acts of kindness, knowing that the morning had provided a lesson in patience, reflection, and the unexpected ways in which our actions resonate beyond ourselves. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the frosted windows, casting a pale glow across Eleanor Green's living room. She sat at her small writing desk, a cup of herbal tea steaming beside her, the warmth a gentle contrast to the crisp air she had just left outside. The memory of the morning lingered, the way her hands had moved instinctively, the subtle thrill of generosity that left her quietly elated. She picked up her pen, pausing as she considered the sequence of events, replaying them in her mind with a meticulous eye for detail. Each gesture, each glance, each whispered breath of wind seemed imbued with meaning she had not fully appreciated in the moment. She wrote slowly, capturing the nuances of the encounter, the faint expression of surprise on the stranger's face, the weight of her own small sacrifice, and the subtle observation of the tall man who had lingered at the edge of the park. Eleanor noted how her heart had quickened, the sensation both thrilling and humbling, and how a simple act of kindness had unexpectedly rippled outward in ways she could not yet measure. The living room was silent except for the soft scratch of her pen on paper and the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards, each sound grounding her in the quiet reality of her apartment. She paused to look out the window again, the snow glistening under the mellow afternoon sun, and thought about the ripple of human actions, how an unanticipated audience might turn an ordinary moment into something extraordinary. Her mind wandered to the possibilities ahead, the ways in which small acts could intersect with the lives of others, sometimes profoundly, without her ever intending them to. Eleanor traced the lines of a photograph on her desk, a picture of the park in winter from years ago, and imagined the story that would unfold there, the subtle interplay of observation, kindness, and chance. The kettle began to whistle gently, and she rose to pour another cup of tea, the warmth radiating through her palms, bringing a comfort that contrasted sharply with the crisp memories of the park. She returned to her desk, leaning back slightly in her chair, contemplating the intricate balance between giving and receiving, between what is seen and what remains hidden, between intention and consequence. As the day stretched onward, Eleanor allowed herself to feel a quiet anticipation, a sense that her morning encounter might mark the beginning of an unexpected series of events, one where her choices, however small, could intersect with the lives of people she had not yet met. She sipped her tea slowly, feeling the subtle warmth seep into her chest, and marveled at the idea that the world could be so responsive, so intertwined, to actions as modest as offering a pair of boots on a frozen bench. The shadows lengthened across the floor, and Eleanor set her cup down, her fingers lingering on the handle as she considered the lessons embedded in such fleeting human exchanges. Her mind circled back to the tall man, to the unspoken acknowledgement that she had been noticed, and to the realization that moments of generosity often carry a quiet, unforeseen power. She straightened her posture, a subtle resolve settling into her shoulders, understanding that the ripples of her kindness might reach far beyond the park, touching lives in ways she could not yet see, and that the afternoon offered a chance to reflect, to plan, and to prepare for the unfolding possibilities that had quietly begun with one deliberate, heartfelt action. The evening descended slowly over the city, casting long shadows across Eleanor Green's apartment. The light from the street lamps filtered through the frosted glass, creating a soft, amber glow that painted the room in warm tones, contrasting with the crisp chill outside. Eleanor sat by her window, wrapped in a thick woolen shawl, reflecting on the day that had unfolded with quiet intensity. She thought about the stranger, the small act of giving, and the subtle observation that had not gone unnoticed. Her pen hovered over the notebook she had opened, and she found herself compelled to record the intricate dance of attention and intention that had begun in the park. Each line she wrote captured the delicate nuances of human behavior, the invisible threads connecting one act of kindness to another unseen consequence. Eleanor recalled the way the stranger had glanced up, a mix of gratitude and humility in his eyes, and she considered the power of acknowledgement, how noticing someone else could magnify the weight of an otherwise ordinary gesture. She reflected on her own life, the years spent in quiet observation, in moments of giving that had gone largely unrecognized, and how today had provided a rare echo of appreciation. The soft hum of the radiator and the distant sounds of traffic provided a backdrop to her thoughts, grounding her in the present while her mind traced forward, anticipating what the ripples of this morning might bring. She considered the tall man who had watched from across the park, his presence both mysterious and commanding, and she wondered about the intersection of chance and intention, how one small decision could catch the attention of someone who might influence outcomes beyond her imagining. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, as following the slow dance of snowflakes that had begun anew against the window, imagining them as symbols of the invisible connections she had made, each one delicate yet enduring. She sipped her tea slowly, feeling the warmth seep into her chest, a subtle reminder of the comfort that accompanies reflection and patience. The apartment felt still, each object in its place, yet Eleanor sensed a stirring of possibilities, a quiet tension in the air as if the day itself had opened a door to unforeseen experiences. She traced her fingers along the edge of the table, considering the layered nature of human interaction, the ways in which a single act can ripple outward, unseen but profoundly felt. Eleanor's mind returned again to the stranger and the tall observer, imagining the unseen impressions left on each of them, the subtle recognition of character and kindness that might shape decisions in ways she could not yet comprehend. She set her cup down and gazed into the soft, diffused light, contemplating the unpredictable trajectory of life, where small acts, sincere and unassuming, could intersect with the paths of others, leading to outcomes both surprising and transformative. The evening deepened, and Eleanor felt a sense of quiet anticipation, a patient expectation that the morning's simple gesture might carry consequences beyond her immediate perception, a reminder that even in ordinary moments, human actions resonate with significance and the smallest expressions of generosity can seed unforeseen opportunities for connection and change. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the soft light filtering through the curtains, the room still filled with the quiet hush of winter. She wrapped herself in a thick cardigan and walked to the kitchen to prepare a simple breakfast, the aroma of brewed coffee filling the air. Her thoughts immediately drifted back to the previous day, to the fleeting encounter in the park, the stranger, and the tall observer who had silently witnessed her act of generosity. The moment seemed both distant and immediate, as if time had folded around the memory, stretching and compressing it in equal measure. She sipped her coffee, savoring the warmth and the clarity it brought, and allowed herself to imagine the stranger walking away, boots fitting snugly, feet warm against the biting cold. Eleanor felt a sense of satisfaction that was quiet but deep, a recognition that even the smallest gestures could have meaning beyond their immediate impact. She moved to the window, looking out over the snow-covered street, noting how the early light caught the edges of each icy branch, making them sparkle like tiny crystals. The city was waking, the distant hum of traffic growing steadily, and Eleanor watched as pedestrians bundled in scarves and hats hurried along, each absorbed in their own routines, unaware of the subtle dramas unfolding around them. She returned to her notebook and began writing again, carefully documenting the details of the park, the expressions on the stranger's face, and the impression left by the silent observer. Each word felt deliberate, a way to anchor her thoughts and to process the quiet thrill of having acted without expectation. She reflected on the nature of human attention, how small acts of kindness could be amplified by the mere fact of being seen, and how unseen generosity might quietly shape perceptions and decisions in ways that could never be fully anticipated. As she wrote, she considered the possibility that the tall man, who had watched from a distance, might play a role in future encounters, his attention perhaps a signal of more than casual observation. The idea filled her with a sense of anticipation, a gentle excitement that moved beneath the surface, restrained yet persistent. Eleanor placed her pen down and walked to the living room, setting her coffee aside and sinking into the armchair near the window. She allowed herself to imagine this tranquil's day unfolding, how the gift of warmth might extend beyond the moment, creating comfort and security in ways she could not see. The thought was comforting and invigorating at once, a reminder that small actions can have profound consequences. The apartment remained quiet, the soft ticking of the clock marking each passing minute, and Eleanor felt the weight of potential, the subtle unfolding of events initiated by an unassuming act. She sipped her coffee again, letting the warmth spread through her hands and chest, and marveled at the quiet power embedded in generosity. The snow continued to glisten outside, each flake reflecting the light in its own unique way, a perfect analogy for the individual impact of small gestures. Eleanor's thoughts drifted to the possibilities that might emerge, to the unseen pathways that could be altered by a simple expression of kindness, and she felt a growing sense of purpose, a quiet certainty that the morning had set in motion a series of events with the potential to touch lives in ways both meaningful and unexpected. She took a deep breath, allowing herself to feel the connection between intention and consequence, and understood that even ordinary days could hold moments of extraordinary significance when approached with care, attention, and an open heart. By mid-morning, Eleanor Green found herself once again drawn to the window, the winter sun climbing higher in the pale sky, casting light across the snow-laden streets below. She held a fresh cup of chamomile tea, the warmth pressing against her palms, and watched the slow procession of life beyond her apartment. Children trudged through the snow in boots several sizes too big, their laughter a distant echo, parents hurrying alongside them with careful guidance, and dogs pulled eagerly at their leashes, sniffing at each frozen patch. Eleanor reflected on the previous days, the series of subtle connections she had inadvertently fostered through a simple act of generosity, and felt the quiet resonance of human interaction in the smallest gestures. Her pen rested lightly on her notebook as she traced thoughts in careful, deliberate lines, recording observations, impressions, and the minor yet significant details that gave life to her experiences. The image of the stranger, now walking with confident, warm steps in the boots she had provided, returned to her mind vividly, accompanied by the recollection of the tall man whose watchful presence seemed to measure and register her deeds. She considered how perception shapes consequence, how an unnoticed action can ripple outward in unforeseen directions, and how her own attention to small details could carry profound significance in the world of others. Eleanor moved to her armchair, sitting with posture straight yet relaxed, the tea held close, and allowed herself a contemplative pause. The soft tick of the clock marked each passing second, punctuating the tranquility of the apartment and giving rhythm to her thoughts. She reflected on the balance between intention and effect, recognizing that the gift of warmth she had given might intersect with the observer's influence, creating an unforeseen alignment of lives and outcomes. The air in the room was still but for the occasional whisper of wind against the frosted panes, and Eleanor let her mind wander through possibilities, each hypothetical scenario tinged with curiosity and careful anticipation. She imagined how subtle observation can amplify the value of acts of kindness, how the witness of integrity can shape decisions, and how small gestures can establish connections that extend far beyond immediate perception. The warmth of the tea, the muted light, and the quiet solitude formed a cocoon of reflection, allowing Eleanor to contemplate both the simplicity and the profound potential embedded in a single moment of care. Her thoughts returned to the stranger and the silent observer, weaving together impressions of human character, the interplay of observation, and the potential for actions to influence others in unexpected ways. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, feeling the heat settle comfortably in her chest, and mused on the idea that generosity, even when given without expectation, has a way of returning significance to the giver. She traced the outline of the window frame with her eyes, noticing the way snowflakes clung briefly before drifting away, a delicate metaphor for the transient yet impactful nature of small actions. The apartment remained quiet, a canvas for contemplation, and Eleanor felt a subtle anticipation, a sense of unfolding that suggested the morning's gestures might continue to reverberate in meaningful ways. Each observation, each reflective note, each sip of tea carried a sense of potential, a recognition that her presence, her attentiveness, and her quiet generosity could quietly shape the events to come, guiding connections and opening possibilities in ways she could neither fully predict nor control, yet which offered a profound sense of purpose and insight into the quiet power of thoughtful, unassuming action. By late morning, Eleanor Green had wrapped herself in a thick scarf and stepped out onto her small balcony, the city stretching below in a patchwork of snow-covered roofs and ice-dusted streets. The light was brighter now, sunlight bouncing off the buildings and glinting on the frozen surfaces, turning the ordinary winter scene into something unexpectedly beautiful. She breathed in the crisp air, feeling it fill her lungs, and allowed herself to savor the quiet clarity of the moment. Her thoughts drifted naturally to the events of the past week, the encounters that had quietly shifted the rhythm of her days, the subtle ways in which human connection could ripple outward from a single gesture. Eleanor observed a passerby struggling to keep balance on an icy sidewalk, and her mind immediately recalled the morning when she had given her boots to the shivering stranger. She smiled faintly, remembering the expression of relief and gratitude, and the distant figure of the tall man who had watched silently, a silent witness to the scene that had left its mark in her memory. The balcony felt like a vantage point not just over the city but over the unfolding patterns of human interaction, and Eleanor allowed her mind to wander through the potential sequences of consequences, the subtle interplay of observation, kindness, and recognition that might develop in ways she could not yet see. Inside, the apartment remained quiet, the hum of the radiator and the occasional creak of floorboards forming a gentle accompaniment to her reflections. Eleanor returned briefly inside, setting her coffee cup down and glancing at the notebook open on the table, the pages filled with careful notes, impressions, and recollections that captured the nuances of the moments she had witnessed and participated in. She ran a hand over the paper, feeling the texture of the pages beneath her fingers, and considered the silent impact of acts of generosity, how something seemingly small could resonate beyond immediate perception, creating connections and impressions that might influence decisions and relationships subtly but profoundly. The thought of the tall observer persisted, his attention a reminder that moments of quiet action are often more potent than expected, that human observation carries weight, and that her gestures, though unassuming, could be shaping perspectives and reactions in ways she could not quantify. Eleanor moved to the window again, watching the steady flow of pedestrians, the glint of sunlight on frost-covered branches, and the soft patterns of shadows moving across the snow. Each observation was a reminder of the delicate, interwoven nature of lives, the unpredictability of outcomes, and the power inherent in noticing and being noticed. She sipped her tea again, allowing the warmth to anchor her senses, and contemplated the unfolding day, the potential meetings, and interactions that might emerge from the subtle ripples she had set in motion. Time seemed to stretch and condense at once, a reflection of the complex interconnection of actions and consequences, and Eleanor felt a quiet anticipation, a sense of poised readiness to observe and engage with what might unfold next. She considered the stranger, the silent observer, and the web of influence that even simple, well-intentioned acts could weave across the fabric of daily life, realizing that her attentiveness, generosity, and reflective consideration had already begun to leave an indelible impression on the unfolding narrative of the world around her. The afternoon sun shifted, casting long, gentle beams across the apartment, and Eleanor remained poised by the window, her senses alert, her thoughts deliberate, fully aware of the potential in each moment, and attuned to the subtle power of presence, observation, and quiet, meaningful action. As the late afternoon sun dipped lower, Eleanor Green remained by the window, observing the gentle descent of light across the cityscape. The streets below began to glow with the warm reflection of lamplight on the snow, the quiet hush of early evening settling over the neighborhood. She held her cup of tea, the aroma still comforting, and traced her gaze over the patterns of frost that had formed overnight on the windowpane. Eleanor reflected on the subtle yet profound series of events set in motion by her simple act of generosity, considering the unseen paths it had created, and the quiet power embedded in small gestures. Her mind wandered to the stranger she had helped, imagining him navigating the city with newfound warmth and comfort, the contrast between the biting cold and the protection provided by her boots striking in its simplicity yet profound in its impact. She thought of the tall observer, whose presence had lent an unexpected weight to her actions, and how observation can silently amplify the significance of behavior, marking deeds that might otherwise pass unnoticed. The apartment was serene, the soft tick of the clock blending with the occasional distant hum of traffic, forming a steady rhythm that allowed her thoughts to unfold and expand. Eleanor returned to her notebook, pen poised over the paper, recording impressions, emotions, and subtle observations that captured the essence of the morning and the reflective hours that had followed. She considered the potential ripple effects, the unseen influence of acts performed without expectation, and the delicate balance of chance and intention in the way people connect and respond. Outside, a few pedestrians moved carefully over the glistening sidewalks, bundled in layers, their breath visible in the cold air, their footsteps creating soft echoes that drifted upward and into Eleanor's consciousness, connecting her to the rhythm of the world beyond the apartment. She allowed herself a quiet smile, recognizing the invisible threads of interaction that weave through daily life, the cumulative effect of attentiveness, kindness, and observation. Each flake of snow on the streets seemed to mirror the fragility and uniqueness of these connections, the fleeting yet enduring imprint of simple gestures. Eleanor sipped her tea slowly, feeling the warmth radiate through her body, and reflected on the way her actions might continue to intersect with the lives of others in ways she could not fully perceive, shaping experiences and perceptions subtly but powerfully. The sun continued its descent, shadows lengthening and deepening the texture of the room, and Eleanor felt a profound sense of presence and awareness, attuned to the significance of both giving and noticing. She contemplated the unfolding evening, the quiet potential that lingered in every small decision and interaction, the layered complexity of human connection, and the ways in which a single, heartfelt act could reverberate outward, influencing not just the immediate recipients but those who silently observed, ultimately shaping the pattern of events yet to come in a manner both unforeseen and meaningful. Eleanor placed her cup down, letting the warmth of the tea and the light of the fading sun mingle in the quiet space, a meditative acknowledgement of the delicate power of empathy, attentiveness, and the enduring impact of kindness, leaving her poised to witness whatever subtle consequences might emerge from the gentle, intentional ripples she had set in motion. As twilight settled over the city, Eleanor Green remained at her window, the soft glow of streetlights reflecting off the snow-covered pavement below. The day had waned into quiet stillness, and Eleanor felt a gentle calm envelop her, a sense of completion mingled with anticipation for the days to come. She held her cup of tea, warm against her hands, and allowed herself to reflect on the sequence of events that had begun with a single act of kindness. Each encounter, from the shivering stranger to the silent observer across the park, seemed to form a chain of subtle influence, a web connecting people in ways both visible and unseen. Eleanor contemplated the potential for human actions to ripple outward, understanding that even small gestures, when executed with sincerity, carry weight far beyond their apparent scale. The tall man remained a silent presence in her thoughts, a symbol of the attentive eye that registers and amplifies simple acts, and she imagined the impact of being noticed not for what she had accomplished, but for the integrity and generosity she had displayed in an unassuming manner. She traced the light on the snow, following the glimmering patterns to distant rooftops and streets, and allowed her mind to wander through the possibilities that the unfolding evening held. The stranger, with his newfound warmth and comfort, became a figure representing how unnoticed lives can intersect with opportunities and recognition in ways that are subtle yet profound. Eleanor's gaze shifted to the softly lit apartment around her, each object familiar, each corner imbued with years of memory, grounding her while the thoughts of potential ripples extended outward into the broader world. She sipped her tea, feeling the warmth permeate her chest, and considered how acts of compassion could quietly shape the perceptions and choices of others, influencing outcomes in unexpected and meaningful ways. The snowflakes continued to drift gently outside, each one unique, delicate, and ephemeral, a fitting metaphor for the transient yet impactful nature of human interactions. Eleanor leaned back slightly, resting her hands on her lap, allowing herself to appreciate the subtle sense of accomplishment that arose from unheralded generosity, the quiet pride in having acted without expectation, and the potential of those actions to reverberate beyond the immediate moment. She contemplated the unfolding narrative, the way one morning could set in motion a sequence of events that touched multiple lives, each influenced by the presence, observation, and response of others. As the city settled into the gentle hum of evening, Eleanor remained at the window, poised and reflective, attuned to the quiet significance of her choices, the interplay of human connection, and the enduring effects of kindness performed without thought of reward. The room around her was filled with warmth and light, a contrast to the chilly streets below, and she felt a serene awareness of the power in small, deliberate acts, understanding that the morning's gesture had initiated a series of subtle changes, a gentle unfolding that would continue to evolve, connecting her to lives and stories she had yet to encounter, leaving her both humbled and quietly exhilarated by the unassuming yet profound influence of compassionate action.